Welcome to Game and Going Deeper, a podcast series by the Gaiman's Brotherhood, where we talk about everything personal development, mental health, and sexuality. We are your hosts, Michael Diorio. He is a life and wellness coach specializing in sexuality, relationships, and self-confidence. Reno Johnson is a spiritual life, love, and business coach. And myself, Matt Lansadell, a counselor and facilitator specializing in healing and empowerment. We each have our own private practice, and in this podcast, we're sharing all of our best stuff. Today, we're talking about self-disclosure, the art of revealing yourself. And we're going to be exploring questions like, how do you practice self-disclosure? And what have you had to learn to disclose about yourself? What fears arise when you practice self-disclosure? And how has self-disclosure positively impacted your life? And we will continue these discussions, as always, on the last Thursday of every month in the Gaiman's Brotherhood Zoom Hangouts, where you can have a chance to share your own experiences. And remember that this podcast and YouTube channel are listener and viewer supported. If you enjoy what you're creating, you can support us by making a donation to the show using the link in the show notes. You can also subscribe to the early access option on Apple Podcast, listen ad-free, and gain early access to episodes. All your support helps us to continue making content for you and supporting our community, and we do thank you in advance for that. If you're looking to accelerate your personal development journey, check out our coaching collection. Learn how to heal and empower yourself at your own pace by getting instant access to 45 plus premium personal development coaching videos created by us, as well as our Healing Your Shame and Building Better Relationships courses. You can head over to gaymengoingdeeper.com for more information about that. Okay, self-disclosure. Really, at the end of the day, this is what we do on this podcast. Like the three of us. And I want to also share too that it doesn't really feel like self-disclosure to the world. It feels like disclosure to you guys, right? And then it just happens to get published and people see it, right? Which is kind of like a weird phenomenon for me. But when I'm sharing, I'm like sharing with you two, and then just people get to kind of like peep in on it. That's how I feel. So for me in this context, it doesn't really feel scary, but usually it is very scary for a lot for people, and even for myself, depending on the context of what I'm sharing. It can be really scary to reveal ourselves. And I think there's different levels of self-reveal. Like there's like retrospective revealing, which is like, I went through this last year and I'm revealing it now. And it's kind of like, it's still vulnerable, but it's like I'm not going through it right now. So maybe that reveals less intense than a reveal of like, yeah, right now I'm struggling with finances, and right now I'm, got depression or whatever it might be that you got going on, and owning that and bringing it to the surface. That can be a different level of self-reveal. There's also things like performative vulnerability, right? Which is like people performing vulnerability as opposed to it actually being a genuine reveal that feels really edgy, right? So self-disclosure is, when we are talking about revealing our true authentic self, it's really revealing our whole self. It's revealing the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And being mindful of who we share these things with too, right? Self-revealing isn't just about like dumping it onto everybody. It's really about like, has this person earned the right to see my good, bad, and ugly parts? And do I feel safe sharing these parts with this person? Right? I think there's discernment that's required when we're talking about self-disclosure. From my perspective, vulnerability and authenticity are required when we're practicing true self-disclosure, right? We're being vulnerable and we're sharing from a vulnerable place our most authentic self, right? Our fears, our needs, our insecurities, our self-doubts, our inner critic, all these sorts of things are really important. And the last thing I want to say here is like really self-disclosure from my perspective, it really attracts the people that we need in our life. Because when we disclose who we authentically are, we attract what we need or who we need back. So for myself, self-disclosure has been a beautiful tool that has helped me attract, well, for example, you two, right? You two wouldn't be in my life if it wasn't for me, disclosing myself and sharing that video that I first shared. being super vulnerable and disclosing my fears and my insecurities and my frustrations with the community. Then I met Callan, and then I met Michael, and then I met Reno, and so there's a real beautiful like outpouring that can happen when we do reveal ourselves in an intimate way. So yeah, that's my little monologue here. Um, so let's start with Reno. Um, Reno, how do you practice self-disclosure, and what have you had to learn to disclose about yourself? Curious.
That was really beautiful, Matt. Thank you
Hmm.
for that opening
Yeah.
and for sharing the benefit of self-disclosure. Like I love that you said, we're here because of self-disclosure. And I think that's a beautiful message and testament. Um, yeah, for me, self-disclosure begins with practice, the practice of curiosity, the practice of compassionate inquiry, the practice of surrender and and rigorous honesty, with myself first, right? With myself first. And I think that the that practice leads to self-awareness. And from that self-awareness, um, self-disclosure can follow.
Mm,
Um, in simple ways, like I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel lonely, I feel tired, I feel confused, I feel agitated, I feel scared, I feel guilty, embarrassed, ashamed, you know. And then to go into exploration and expression of like why that's present, I think that's big. And that to me is self-disclosure in its sort of simplest form. Like if I were speaking to a child, I'd say like start there. How do you feel and why? You know?
mm,
Um I've had to learn to disclose like when I need help, that's hard. When there's struggle, that's challenging. When there's confusion or uncertainty, when there's fear, when I'm advocating for my needs, that's a big one too.
mm,
And asking for what I want, right? When I'm honoring and expressing my values, my ideas, my beliefs, perspectives, my experience, and when I feel hurt or insecure. And those last ones can be really challenging because, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but to disclose one's values and ideas and beliefs, like and perspectives, there's always sort of this edginess to that, right? Like, will they be received, or will they be rejected? And if I align closely with those things, then maybe there's a sense that they're not just being rejected, I am, you know. And so I like what you said earlier about discernment, um, because that's really important, Maybe someone isn't rejecting me, they're just not on board with what I'm disclosing, or they don't align with or resonate with what I'm disclosing. So
mm,
anyway, that is my answer.
mm. Thanks, Reno.
Thanks.
Yeah, good topic. Thank you for, I didn't know what I was going to share, but now I do. So thanks guys for getting the juices flowing for me. I guess I'll start by saying a remnant of my lone wolf personality is that I do still, and I do feel more comfortable keeping my cards close to my chest in my life, which is probably very ironic for a lot of people listening to this podcast because we talk a lot. I don't keep my cards close to my chest here.
Yeah.
But really, I do. I mean, people who know me know that I don't divulge too much about some things, but other things I divulge a lot. But I believe that information is power, and so my fear, and we'll get to this more, is that information can be used against me. So I've learned to hide kind of behind my shyness through my life, and I thought that was a good thing. I was like, okay, well, it's just because I'm shy, or it's just because I don't want people to know this about me. I mean, being gay is an obvious example of that, being in the closet, right, when I was a kid. Um, but at the same time, obviously, in the correct circumstances, self-disclosure is a great thing, can be a great thing, not always, as you had talked about, Matt. So how do I practice it? I mean, besides here with you guys, that's the best practice I've got, but also in, in my work, right? Like in my coaching, sometimes I will, to the extent that it's appropriate and will help, like I can kind of relate some of my own experiences with people,
Mm.
and that can be very helpful. And I've had to learn when and how to do that in the right circumstance, in the right container, obviously. Obviously, when it comes to relationships and people that I love, disclosing how I'm feeling, disclosing what's going on in especially with my feelings, that's usually the hardest one for me. Um, in a way that, again, serves a greater purpose. I think the reason why, the motivation why, is really important to me. Sometimes those motivations can feel manipulative when I'm on the receiving end of it. I'm like, I don't know, I don't like where this is going. Like some people try to overshare to an extent to get something from me. I feel sometimes I don't like that. I'm very sensitive to that. So I want to make sure I do the same thing, but I think I overdo it. I think I don't share enough sometimes. And I have been told from many people in my life that I can come across as too guarded or aloof or arrogant or even, snobby, because I don't, like, in a big group, I'll just be the kind of quiet guy, observing, watching, noting, it's what I do. I'm really good at that. I've always kind of played that role in my family, youngest child, big loud family. I just kind of learned to stay quiet and watch the show. So that
Mm.
stays with me. So it's harder for me to um give myself permission. And what I find helps is when people will say, Michael, tell me, how are you feeling? Right? Like when I get that invitation, then I can do it. But it doesn't come naturally to me, which again, I know is probably very, very surprising for everyone listening to this after the last 3 years of me sharing my entire personal life on this podcast.
Mm. Thanks, Michael. It reminds me of like the structure of this podcast. Like when we first started, it was the four of us, and Reno and Callan were more like jump in and talk.
Yeah.
And then Michael and I were more sit back and just listen. And
Yeah.
then it was like an uneven distribution of sharing. So we decided to create this structure, and that's why the structure exists. And I think Michael and I prefer to have that space where we can just talk and not be like you're having to jump in or people jumping in. So it just made me think of that, like,
Yeah.
because I was like that in my family too. I was kind of shy, and I was like never the one to like fully assert. I'd always kind of hang back, and I was okay to just listen. And in most cases, I'm pretty okay to just listen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Reno does a really good job. I remember in those early days. I remember, if you guys, I was not comfortable doing the podcast in the early days. And Reno, I remember you specifically would jump in and say, Michael, tell us what you're thinking. Like
Yes,
you
I
would do a
remember that.
really good job of doing that. So thank you, Reno.
Yeah, yeah. Reno's good at including.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I like what you said, Reno, about like self-disclosure, and really like it's about disclosing to yourself first, and really like because sometimes we can be in denial about things, or we can like have these kind of layers of things that we're like blocking against seeing in ourselves. And I live my life by the 5 principles of authentic relating, and the third principle is own your experience, and the fourth principle is reveal your experience. And it's important to own your experience first and kind of be with it and get clear about it, so then you're not projecting it onto people. If we don't own our experience and we just jump into revealing it, it's easy to lead into projection. And I find that, it's interesting too. I think self-disclosure for me has led to a lot of beautiful things. But one of the things that it's led to that has been a little bit challenging is people projecting onto me. So for example, they'll like listen to my shares in my videos or on this podcast or even in my sessions. They'll sometimes people haven't worked towards maybe some of the things that I have, and they'll see the way I'm negotiating with this part of myself, and they aren't negotiating with that part of themselves in the same way that I am. And that can cause like dissonance for them, and then they project. So it's something that I'm very mindful of, and I'm sure I do that too. I think we all have blind spots, and we're all kind of projecting onto different people's projectors at different times. So yeah, it's interesting. But I want to share a story of something that just happened to me. So I just started. I haven't run a workshop online for my highly sensitive people for 2 years. I just haven't been feeling it. But I just started one, and it started on Wednesday this week. And they used to be 2.5 hours long. I decided to create them to be 3 hours long because they felt a bit rushed before. So we're working, and it was supposed to be 4:30 to 7:30. And we're going along, and I started, all of a sudden, for some reason, I had 7 in my mind. So I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh my God, time's going by so quick. So I started like going through and kind of like rushing the material and things like that. And then go to start landing the plane at 7 o'clock and wrap up. And no one said anything to me. And I'm thinking like, like no issue. So then we wrap up, and I send out an email to the participants afterwards, and I always include my email in there. And I'm going and I'm looking and I'm like, I don't see the email coming through. I'm like, what the heck? So I go into my email system, and it says 7:30 that the email is supposed to be sent out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like I totally ended the workshop 30 minutes early. So immediately, like a wash of shame comes over me, and I'm just like, what a knob. I can feel my inner critic like totally, starting to get activated. And I'm like, okay, I got two options here. I can pretend like it didn't happen and never bring it up. And I know everybody knows, but we just won't say anything. Or I can disclose and reveal my experience. So I have everybody in a WhatsApp chat. So I go in on the WhatsApp chat, shared a video, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I'm so sorry. Just owning my experience, and then pause, afterwards, 30 minutes goes by and my inner critic is still running wild. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm beating myself up. So I get on the video again, and I, just share some more, and I'm just revealing the things that are coming up for me. And keep in mind, like my workshop is called Authentic Relating and Empowerment. So I'm like practicing these principles of like revealing myself and revealing what's coming up for me. But yeah, it was just really interesting, like how these parts of me. So a big part that I don't like to disclose is like failures or not getting it right. I think so. These feelings or these experiences lead to inadequacy for me. I always feel inadequate, like I did something wrong or I'm wrong if I make a mistake, which is kind of pointing me right now into like I have an interesting relationship with my inner critic, and I'm really like reconciling and working with this part of myself. So I think that's a big one. And then the next one for me would be fear. So growing up, having trauma in my life, I learned one of my biggest protectors became fight, and just to really kind of shell off and put high walls up and these sorts of things. So I never wanted to show people that I was scared, and especially in my intimate relationships. So for me, in order to have successful intimate relationships, I have to reveal my fears and share them with people, because otherwise they run wild, and then I end up acting them out. They play out in my relationship if they don't get talked out. So for me, that's like probably the biggest one that I need to really always be mindful of, is sharing these parts of myself with people that can hold that, I should say, because I'm not just going to share my fears with somebody that can't hold that with me. And because I think when in some instances when I've shared my fears with somebody that can't hold that, they freak out. They're like, I don't know what to do with this, and then it leads to me feeling rejected, them feeling like they can't, they're not good enough because they can't hold that. So it's it's kind of a fine art, right? I'm finding and I'm learning, and I've learned that it's really about trial and error. I've overshared and overdisclosed at times, and then I've undershared and underdisclosed at times. And I'm kind of finding this like nice sweet spot in my life of like, how to share, when to share, and with whom to share, I think are three really important things to always be mindful of. So
I want to piggyback on something you just said, Matt. Oh,
please, yeah.
I remember I had this pattern in relationships where about 2 months in, I would experience this sort of guttural nausea, and I would completely shut down and go from being, totally attracted and enamored with the person I was with to just like almost repulsed by them. And I couldn't understand why. It was such a confusing experience for me. And I just thought I was destined to play this out again and again, because I had no knowledge at the time of what was possible. And I remember the first time I disclosed it, um, what you just described happened. It was like, I didn't know that this person couldn't handle me disclosing what I was experiencing, right? Because for me, I was simply sharing what was there. It wasn't reflective of us breaking up or something like that. I was just like, I need to say what's here because it's so big and so present. And it felt necessary to kind of talk it out. He ended up really taking it personally, and I had to reassure him that it wasn't about him. And then I remember in the relationship that followed, I shared it again. Or what happened was it was coming up, and the person I was with inquired,
Hmm.
and they did so compassionately. And that was such a remarkable healing for me, because they were available to help me kind of work through this thing in our relationship. And I ended up overcoming that pattern and being with them for, it was a record for me, a record 2.5 years, you know. I
Hmm.
went from 2 months to 2.5 years, because they were able to hold space for my share, you know. So it's really beautiful. I love that you shared what you shared. And it really is, there really is something to selecting, you know, who you disclose to. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to piggyback on
Yeah.
that. Um, I think you just really made me have an epiphany. It was really cool because I need that in a relationship. Like I want to be kind of like drawn out. I don't want to necessarily have to always be drawn like, and I've never met a guy that draws me out yet. And that's probably why I haven't been in a relationship that's been like, okay, this is my person. I've always felt like this isn't quite what I'm looking for, like, but I'll hang out here anyway. So yeah, thank you, because I'm going to lead with that now and be like, I want you to ask me lots of questions. I want you to draw out, ask me what my fears are. Let me, you know, like, and let's work through it together, because I find sometimes I'm like sharing things and I feel like people aren't interested. They don't want to know
We're
about my
good.
fears.
We're good at drawing and sharing, you know, you and I
Yeah, I
feel like
for
we're
real.
good at
Exactly.
drawing at other people, and we're really good at
Yeah,
sharing, you know.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
agree with you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thanks, Riel.
Hmm.
Anything you want to piggyback on, Michael?
I actually just thought, well, I mean, yes, I actually just thought of a recent example. So I'm here in Puerto Vallarta meeting lots of people, and you know, usual small talk. What do you do? Where are you from? Blah 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 blah. And one guy, the one that sticks with me, kind of is similar to what you had said. He asked me, um, like think like questions like, oh, and this is your, you know, this is your fourth time here. What is it about Puerto Vallarta that keeps you coming back? Like those kinds of questions, like what are you drawn to? Obviously you're very drawn to this place. What is it about that? Is there a specific memory? So I will say, like, people who are interested in you genuinely, obviously that feels good, right? That feels good to us, like, oh, this person's interested in me. But that doesn't always mean you have to share. I'm not saying that you have to, you know,
Yeah.
give into that, but I will say that it does feel nice. And I mean, if we could talk about another topic on dating, we can get into that another day. But what's that saying? Instead of worrying about being interesting, be interested. I think we've used
Yeah,
that before. Yeah,
yeah, I like that. I always say in authentic relating, they say people become interesting when you become interested.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, and it's beautiful because then there's always space, you know. It's like if I'm interested, if you come in interested and I come in interested, then there's just
Yeah.
constant reciprocity, you know, as opposed to like, oh, well, you know, they got to go first, right? It's
Yeah.
like, let's both be interested, you know, let's
Yeah.
both be available. Yeah.
I bet you in our line of work, we probably do that a lot more easily and maybe more than other people just because
Mhm.
we're used to it, right? That's just what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some feedback on like dates and things where people feel interrogated because
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just, this is what I do for a living. I talk
Yeah.
about deep things for a living. So like when I ask a question, like I'm like, oh, it's, you could answer like with the most horrible traumatic thing and it wouldn't even phase me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so but I think I've had to learn how like that most people aren't like that. So I
Hmm.
have to like draw that back in and be like, okay, take it slow, Matt. Like you don't need to ask like the most intimate questions right away.
I
That's
was
why I
at a
love hanging out with you.
I was at a pool party here and everyone's like drinking, have a good time in the pool. And then I'm just chatting with this one guy and he starts talking about, like, you know, this book he wants to write. He's like, oh, I wanted to write this book my whole life and I haven't been able to. And immediately I'm like, oh, well, why not? Why do you think that is? Like, just, but it's so natural to me. Like, I really, truly want to know why. And then we got into this whole conversation, just the two of us in the middle of this pool. Everyone else is just on another level. We're having this
Ugh.
very intimate moment, which I love.
Yes.
I love. Like, I'd rather be doing that with him and finding out what is the block behind why he hasn't written this book that he allegedly loves so much, right? It was a very good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should offer life coaching poolside.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Guys.
$100 for
Okay.
10 minutes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm into it.
This is it.
This is
Make
it.
money
This is,
while you're on holidays.
yeah, this is where I live now. I'm gonna have to figure that out. There's a
Yeah.
pool right behind me. You can't see it, but there's a pool behind that
Yeah.
chair. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say Michael's backdrop is not a green screen, by the way. That's a pretty epic epic
It's real,
view.
my friends. It's all
Ugh.
real.
Okay, next question. What fears arise when you practice self-disclosure, Reno?
Yeah, that I'll be alienated, exiled, alone,
Mm,
canceled, harmed, that I'll experience loss or
mm,
rejection. Um, definitely. Like, you know, I remember when I came out, right? I was terrified that the whole world was going to like implode,
mm,
right? That I was going to lose everyone and everything. And then when I came out as spiritual, I was like, oh no, like everyone's going to think I'm so weird, right? Because I'm into the spiritual stuff. And then funny enough, when I started going back to church again. And I was like really curious about the Bible and scripture and God. And like that was really edgy too to say that out loud. I was like, oh no, now like all my friends who identify as spiritual or all my friends who identify as, queer are like going to alienate me because I'm into God or I'm into church, right? And I'm gonna lose everybody. When I came out, it was the opposite. It was like, oh, all my religious Christian hetero friends are gonna, right? So there was that. And then even I would say I'm not big into politics, but even in these moments
mm,
where like I connect to certain conservative political views, right? Or yeah, I mean, there's so many things I can think of, but it's like there's always this fear if I just close this, I'm going to be exiled, I'm going to be alone, I'm going to be
mm.
canceled. Even in these moments where maybe there's something I don't understand, right? Like, and I'm not going to get too deep into this, but like world issues, and really big, significant discussions, whether it's like some of the wars that are happening in the world or things surrounding identity, religion, politics, right? It's like if I fear sometimes that if I express that I don't know or I'm confused or I don't necessarily agree with something in this moment and that could change, right? Um, there's this sense that like people will promptly jump down my throat or just like cut me off, right? And
Mm,
I'm like, whoa, 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 let me just reveal what's happening for me, before you
mm,
make any assumptions about who I am and what it all means, So I think there's a lot of that there. And I could go on a tangent about, all this canceling business and stuff, but I won't. But my God, it's like, oh. So yeah, that's that's my answer to that question.
mm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Reno. Have we ever done a podcast on cancel culture?
We
No,
should.
no, we
Yeah,
have
I
We
got
not.
a lot to say
should.
on that one for
We might
sure.
get canceled for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll practice what we preach. Um, Thanks, Reno. I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
Have you ever struggled with people pleasing in your life?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly. Wanting to be liked,
Mm,
wanting to be loved, wanting to be praised, wanting to be viewed as good,
yeah.
and virtuous, certainly. Yeah. And doing whatever was necessary to be viewed in that way. Even to the point of um dishonoring myself and what was true for me and aligned for me.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought so, and I resonated with your share. I think we have
Yeah.
a lot of similarities there. So,
Thanks for asking.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, what fears arise? Everything you said, 100%. So all of that, yeah, that really resonated with me. I would say at the beginning, or not the beginning, or younger in my younger days, maybe, there was a lot of that fear of judgment and criticism. And then, as I said at the beginning, can this be used against me? Because information is power. And so people will have information about me. Will they use this against me? Can they use this against me to emotionally manipulate me? You know, blackmail me, whatever that is. That was a lot of it at the beginning. That has dissipated to a big degree because of the nature of the work we do. Like, we're here. I've been doing this for a few years. On my Instagram, I certainly say some things that ruffle some feathers. So I've just gotten used to it. To that degree. I would say more these days, what fears I have is the vulnerability hangover. Did I overshare? And then once it's done, it's done. They're like, oh fuck, I can't take it back. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. People are gonna think blah 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 blah. It feels very raw. It feels very overexposed. I say, oh, my humanity is showing. People can see my humanity. They can see the pain, the imperfection, the whatever. So it's not just about the judgment and criticism that comes with it. It's more so like the shame almost, like I did something wrong. Like I did something wrong by sharing that. I don't know when this is going to get released, but a podcast I did with my ex now, still feels weird to say that. And we talked about the end of our relationship and why we came to that decision, and sort of it was enough time had passed that we were ready to talk about it, but still, when that podcast was released, people who are on my email list know this because I told my subscribers, but I wanted to pull the episode. I wanted to just like take it down, and I had another one ready to go, so I could just have easily replaced it and just said, fuck it, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. That was very much a vulnerability hangover moment, because I thought, this is too much. I'm oversharing. Like, why am I letting people into this level of detail? Or why did we? It was a choice we both made. So I think that was it. And I had to really go through that. And one of the things we do with vulnerability hangovers is this is very common in like men's groups and sharing, right? Like I run a men's group, and one of the first things we talk about is, what is a vulnerability hangover? What does it feel like? What does it sound like in your mind? Which I kind of just did now. I shouldn't have said that. I wish I didn't say that. I wish I could take that back. And why are we having it? Why are we experiencing this like deep shame from sharing, which is supposed to be this thing that connects us? So I had to kind of practice what I preach in that moment. And that was probably the hardest of all the podcasts I've done so far on the show. That was the hardest one for me. And I really did. Up until it was released, I was like, I'm just going to pull it. I don't care. But I didn't. So I think that's been the hardest thing, is like knowing, like Matt, you were talking about that line. Like sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's not enough. Like sometimes it feels very, very close to that too much line. And what I've learned, how I've dealt with it in my own mind, is I kind of ask myself some questions like, have I processed this situation, whatever it is, enough in my own mind? Do I feel clean about it here? Even if it's a painful situation, do I feel clean about it? Do I feel clear? Do I feel like, okay, this is something that happened. Yes, it's painful, but can I use that? And am I ready to use that to like let people in and show them around, so to speak, so that it could potentially help them. It could potentially give them some hope, or give them some insight or something into for their own lives, not for me. It's not about like, look at me. It's more so, hey, here's the situation that's happening. Feel free to use this and take what you want from it and use it in your own life. So that's kind of the criteria that I go through now. And in that moment, we did it together. So my former partner and I sat there and said, okay, are we ready to do this? Like, and we said, here's what we're going to share. Here's what we're going to share. And here's what we're not going to share. We're not going to go into this level of detail, which is like an iceberg, right? Into our relationship. What we shared was like this big versus what everyone else, what is behind closed doors. And so being very deliberate about, okay, what am I willing to share? And what am I not willing to share? What's the line there? And then just making sure you stick to it. But I'd say that's my biggest fear now, is the oversharing, the vulnerability hangover that comes with it.
I have a question for you, and I also have a statement to make. So, one of the things that I've noticed in like reality television is actually the thing that got me. So I'm like a shameless Real Housewives fan. I love the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And one of the things I noticed is that surrounding reality television culture, there's like everyone wants in, right? You give them some, and they like they want it all, right? They're like, we give it all to us. So even when cameras aren't rolling, they're like, what's going on in your personal life, and do. And my experience is that there's this like feeling of entitlement to like your whole life and your whole world, because you've given people a little taste or a little inside look. And I really just want to say that, like, just because we get on here every week and share what we choose to share does not mean that, that like we owe we owe the world everything, and all of
Mm.
us, it's perfectly acceptable that you just shared some portion of the iceberg. I think that that's okay, and if and when you're ready to share more, then you will. And if that's never, then that's okay. I really don't think that we owe it to anyone to share everything, and sure, it's a nuanced statement. I'm sure there are different, there's certain situations where maybe that idea could be challenged a bit, but overall, I think like it feels important for me to call that out, this sort of sense of being entitled to all of us and every, all of our lives. And it's like, no, we need some for us, we need to keep some for us, right? So the other thing I wanted to ask you was, why did you share? If I may, why did you share that? Because it's so powerful and vulnerable that you chose
Yeah,
to.
good question. Um, we did it because as we were going through this breakup, we both said to each other, like, wow, we've gone through breakups before, but nothing like this. And it was very different for me. It was a new experience for me. Like, nothing has happened in this relationship. Like, usually there's an event, a triggering event that causes a breakup and people part ways, and that's that. They block each other, delete each other, la 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 la. And for him, it was very much the same, but that is not at all what happened. And so, um, while it was actually happening, I was going through a lot of my own growth, and my own, I was going through my own stuff. And as I was doing that, I was like, this is really important lesson for me. Like, how to say goodbye was kind of like that era of lesson for me. Like, how to say goodbye, how to know when to say goodbye. In the episode I talked about, you don't have to end something because it's gone bad, or you don't have to destroy something to end something. You can come to a very peaceful, beautiful goodbye. And we don't always get that option. So I had learned a lot about goodbyes, and I thought, you know what, this is really important stuff, because so many in gay relationships, I find it so hard to meet other gay guys, right? For friendships and whatnot. If we have someone in our lives who we love genuinely and care about, um, what so often happens is, in a relationship we kind of stick with it, and then it deteriorates, and then it ends up getting resentful and whatnot. But that doesn't have to happen. It could just be a case of, you know what, you're not my forever person, but I love you still, and I want you to be my forever friend, maybe. And so that transition, I had never really been able to do that before. So that was the reason why. And he felt the same. And it was actually his idea, fun fact, his idea to do the episode, not mine.
This is so, I love that you
Yeah.
just shared that. Thank you. Because I didn't know, I definitely, that I made an assumption that it was your idea, mainly because, the nature of our lives here is that we're often open and
Yeah.
sharing, right? So I thought surely Michael initiated this, but wow,
No. Yeah.
Mm.
Thanks
that's
for asking, though.
beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. What
Mm.
about you, Matt?
Hmm. Yeah, there's so much percolating. I'm trying to think of which direction I want to go here. Um, yeah, I think, this podcast, it's like, we kind of structured it to be like a shared lived experience podcast, like gay men going deeper. Like, we talk about ourselves, we talk about, our life experiences, and we share them. Um, and yeah, I feel what you were saying, Michael, for sure. Like, I've been emotional on the podcast, and then I have these hangovers after, and I'm like, oh my God, the release date, and like we're like 2 months ahead now, right? So I've got to sit on this for like 2 months, knowing that, oh my God, everybody's gonna know I'm crying about my inner child and shit like that. So it's like, and it's interesting because when that episode aired, like a lot of my clients watch it, and one of my clients messaged me and was like, it's really or I was really uncomfortable seeing my therapist in that position. And I was like, oh, like that was such a pang for me. I was like, oh, like it's like the worst thing that somebody could have said, but I'm like, I needed that, because I was like, what it did is it reminded me of my humanity. And I think what I've been going through for the last few years, it's like so much humility. Like, I've met humility in like its deepest way, because of like a deep amount of suffering and things that I've been going through. Um, so I think, again, like if you look at a vulnerability hangover, it's the ego feeling like a little bit bruised or wounded. And it's like the vulnerability hangover like transforms into humility. And I think it's like such a gift. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I just went to an authentic relating training. It was the leadership training. It was a 7-day retreat in Costa Rica. I was really struggling. When I had left, I went on a personal leave from work. I took 5 weeks off. So I got there and I was just like, and I had signed up for this like 6 months prior, thinking, oh my, it's 6 months from now, I'll hopefully be feeling better. I really wanted to do this, but I wasn't. I was actually feeling worse. So I get there and I'm like, fuck, there's like 30 people and I'm feeling like crap. And like, I'm like watching everybody bond. And then I was doing like, I was observing, like they call it a hologram or a pattern coming up. I'm like, I'm going to be over here and you guys can be over there and I'm just going to watch. And, so I was really noticing some wounding that I have around belonging and letting myself belong. And it started to bring up a lot of emotions for me. And, throughout the course of that week, it was very emotional. Every share that I had, I was like crying and like big heavy crying, and I was releasing a lot and purging a lot. So I was meeting vulnerability hangover after vulnerability hangover, and then again more humility would come. So yeah, I actually wasn't going to share this, but I didn't even associate the two. Like, the fear of self-disclosure is the aftermath of my share. I never actually thought about that. So thank you for bringing that into my realization. But I think just to, kind of answer the question directly, I would say, well, I kind of grew up thinking like, being gay, if I disclose this to my family, they're going to think I'm weird or disgusting or deviant or these sorts of things. So there was this thing. And then I've kind of had this, I don't know, karmic experience throughout my life where like I'm the person in the room or in the group that will say the things that other people are thinking but don't say. And it's caused a lot of people to again project onto me or be like, this guy's weird, or like, we don't want him here because he makes us feel uncomfortable things or whatever it is. And this happens in my family as well. I kind of have felt a little bit black sheepish in the family, and I've had family members even describe me as weird and things like that. So it's like that's been a big thing for me. So this notion of being weird or different has led to me having fears around like being rejected, feeling that I'm too much for people, or that they won't know how to support me, because I do know and have been given feedback on like being very intense. My energy is very intense, and I carry a lot of momentum into connections and things like that. And so there's this feeling that I've had a lot of my life of being misunderstood. And so I'm always like really hesitant, and that probably is related to the belonging. Like why I hang out over here and watch is because I'm like, I'm worried that people are going to think all these things that I just said, right? Like he's weird, I don't understand him, why does he make me feel uncomfortable, like these sorts of things. So they come up. So I'm always really mindful of that, and I'm like learning now that it's like, and this was related to my inner critic, I have to get my inner critic in check, because once my inner critic is in check, it won't matter, right? Because what this all is these are judgments that I have of myself. These are perceptions of my own reality, and I'm projecting them into the container, right? In that situation, like if I share, these people are going to think I'm weird. Well, I have to think I'm weird in order for that to even become a problem, right? So there's a part of me that thinks I'm weird, that doesn't understand or feels that I'm not good enough or whatever it might be. So I just know that this is kind of where I'm at right now, and it's likely been a big contributor to like my depression and the things that I've been going through. Is my inner critic has really being challenged right now, and like coming to the surface, and like being ready, like preparing to be healed likely. And it's like, it's just been such a crazy transformation. But yeah, I know that's a big share, but it's like, it's just, yeah, it's real. It's what I'm going through right now. So okay. The last question, Mr. Reno, how has self-disclosure positively impacted your life?
Yeah, there's one thing I want to start with is there's this scene in the movie 8 Mile with Eminem, and he shows up to a rap battle. And in these rap battles, the name of the game is to come in with ammunition, right? Michael has referenced a few times, like, will this be used against me? And so the name of the game is to come in with ammunition and kind of use it against your opponent, right? And so Eminem comes into the rap battle, and instead of coming armed with you know, eh, ammunition, information about his opponent, he comes in and reveals everything about himself that his opponent could possibly say. You know, yeah, I am white. Yeah, I do live in a trailer park. Yeah, my girl did cheat on me. Yeah, you know, and he just like lays it all out in this really beautiful and poetic way through rap.
Mm.
And when it's his opponent's turn to speak, he's choked, as they say in the rap battle arena. Like he's got nothing to say. And I just thought, what a remarkable moment. And it stays with
Mm.
me to this day,
Mm.
because what I've come to realize is that when I disclose the very things I'm most afraid of people knowing about me or saying about me, and I face that myself of my own choosing, of my own sovereignty, um, I'm liberated.
Mm.
You know, I am liberated. And so, yeah, self-disclosure has like, you know, it's made me more courageous. It's made me more compassionate, right?
Mm.
There are people who I used to judge and who I had trouble relating to. And as I disclosed myself and came to terms with myself and connected with myself and was rigorously honest with myself, it was like, oh, the, you know, the um you know, the cheater, or the like um the I'm trying to think of other examples, but like, you know, all these people who are infamous, I could begin to have compassion for, even them, you know, anyone I had previously judged, I could have compassion for, and especially myself, you know.
Mm.
I became more empathetic, I became more understanding, I became more intuitive, I became more clear, you know, I've become more stubborn and abundant as well, which is surprising because that is not the story that my mind and my ego would have me believe. It's like, oh, but you won't be powerful, but
Mm.
you won't be in control, but you will be alone, but you will be without. I have gained so much and more every time that I have disclosed, right? And the, you know, the things I feared would happen have happened at times, right? Like couple of my best friends from high school, they're not my best friends anymore. You know, I came out and that changed things, right? So I'm not suggesting that what we fear won't happen. It has.
Mhm.
But in some ways, it's been the greatest gift. Yeah, I have to sit in the discomfort and the anguish of, you know, maybe being exiled, alone, whatever it is, you know, for that moment. But what happened on the other side of that was, you know, I gained things far greater than what I lost,
Mm.
right? People, you said this earlier, Matt, I think my self-disclosure has become this filter. And it's like, if you're a fit for me, then who I am and what I share and how I'm being, it will not be too much, you know, will not merit canceling or exiling,
Mm.
right? And so now the people who are in my life, like they're meant to be, because I am being authentic and they are drawn to this authentic version of myself,
Mm.
right? And so that's what I've gained. The right clients, the right partners, the right lovers, the right friends, the right opportunities, you know, all of that. And everything else can just kind of fall away.
Mm.
You know, it's okay that you aren't meant to be in my life. It's okay that that opportunity is not meant for me. It's okay that I'm not meant to work here. That's fine, you know?
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
Nailed
I
it.
want to, yeah, I want to share impact of that share because it really hit me in a
Yeah.
really good way. You're There's one word that I sum up your share. It's like relatability. And that would, I would say, would be the biggest impact that you've had on me in this whole whatever 4 years that we've been doing this. is I find there's a relatability. So whatever, however many episodes ago it was where you forgot what you were talking about like mid-sentence, it's like a great fear of mine. And I'm like, to see that you handled it and you just revealed that experience, you disclosed it. It was like something happened with my inner critic, and it was like, because my inner critic's perfectionistic, right? It like doesn't want to get anything's wrong because it doesn't want to feel inadequate or like a failure. And what happens when I see people like revealing themselves is it's like it makes them relatable, and then it's like it softens my inner critic. And it's like, okay, see? Like, because my inner critic's young. It's a very young part inside me. And it's like, okay, like we don't have to have it all together. Like we can fall apart, we can be messy, we can admit that we're wrong or that we're whatever. So yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm touched by that. And that word, I will carry that with me. So important. Relatability. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What about
that
you,
was a
Becky?
great share, Reno. Again,
Mhm.
like just like the last one, I love everything you said, and I want to just underline it and underscore it all. It was perfect.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking as you were talking that this episode could easily be called "Coming Out"
Yeah,
because
totally.
self-disclosure is coming out, right? Like you had talked to Reno about coming out as gay and then coming out as spiritual and coming out as all these things, and that's
Mhm.
what it is. And if you think about it, coming out is that liberation that you talked about. It's like, this thing is off my shoulders. I can come out, I can talk about it, I can disclose this about myself. So think about all the ways that, maybe you're not out, like all the ways like you need to maybe come out a little bit more. So this dropping the perfectionism thing, or dropping the something about you that you feel like you want to come out, and how good that maybe felt when you came out of the closet as gay or with whatever sexual orientation you are. There's relief in that, just as there can be relief in coming out in many other ways. So I just like that is a very nice tie-in. And anyone who's listening to this, maybe who doesn't really know what self-disclosure means, think of the concept of coming out. That
Yeah.
might really help you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to repeat everything Reno said, but everything Reno said, that's been the biggest benefit, and how it positively impacted my life. I will say again, going back to men's groups, and we do this in the GMB Zoom Hangouts on Thursdays. We see it there every month, and then in my own men's groups, and I'm sure in yours as well. When people come together and they share something, doesn't have to be the whole thing, doesn't have to be the whole enchilada, even if you just share a little bit, which is what I recommend starting with. It feels good, it feels relief, you get the burden off you, and other people get to see your humanity. Oh yes, my humanity is showing, and that is a good thing, because there's that R word again. It makes you relatable, it makes you easier to connect with. Remember at the beginning I said, when I didn't disclose much and I was very shy, people thought I was aloof and
Mhm.
snobby.
Mhm.
Those are not true. Not that I was just shy and scared or
Mhm.
insecure. But as you say that, as you disclose some of that, this is how I'm feeling right now showing up in this group. It makes you relatable. The weight is lifted off you. And then all of a sudden, then you can all of a sudden start sharing a little bit more easily, but more authentically, because
Mhm.
you're not hiding behind that mask anymore. The mask is gone, at least a little bit.
Mhm.
So I will say that I have seen this happen in all of our sharing circles over all the years we've done. And it's such a beautiful thing. I love seeing men, especially gay men, especially do
Mhm.
that, drop the perfectionism a bit, drop the mask, say, listen, this is what I'm insecure, this is what I'm insecure about my body, this is what happened to me in my ex, and this is what he told me, this is what the messaging I got from my parents was, that I'm not good enough, that I'm a, whatever that was. And everyone else gets to say, oh wow, like that must feel terrible. And also sometimes, oh, me too, I'm not the
Mhm.
only one. Oh, that's so nice to hear that I'm not the only one who had to go through that, that I'm not the only one who experiences pain or shame or loss or grief or despair. Take your pick. And that is that common humanity. It's back to that thread of relatability. We're all in this together. We may
Mhm.
be very different, come from very different backgrounds, but we have that emotional experience all the same. I have pain, you have pain, we all have pain, we all have insecurity. So I
Mhm.
think that part of disclosure has positively impacted my life personally, but I have also seen that and facilitated that in other spaces as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, one more thing I want to add.
So,
Sorry. Reno had talked about abundance. And I would say the more I talk candidly about the things that I give a shit about that piss a lot of people off, sex,
mhm.
spirituality, whatever, money,
Mhm.
it pisses a lot of people off. But guess what? Clients come rolling in.
Mhm.
They're like, oh my God, Michael, I heard what you said about blah, 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 blah. I needed to hear that, like, you're the guy I want to work with. Like, all this stuff happens, and right now you had said it, like, it is actually abundant, and not just in a business sense, but even in a personal sense, right? It is that filter. It truly is the best filter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great segue into what I wanted to share. So thank you. And well said. You articulated that so beautifully. Yeah, the odd time, I would say, like, I don't know, over the course of my career, maybe 10 times, people have written on my work, like, oh my God, why would you share that? This is stuff you share in therapy, not publicly. Like, I get these comments. And I can understand where they're coming from for sure. But what I would say is I would challenge that, because I think that's an old paradigm. It's an old paradigm from like the 50s, when it's like the nuclear family and sweep everything under the rug. Don't tell your neighbors that we have, that dad's an alcoholic and like all this crap, right? And it's like, I think we're breaking that. Our generation is breaking that paradigm of like, no, we don't want to be silent anymore. We don't want to hide in shame. And so I'm a huge proponent for self-disclosure, and I think it's important. I think it's important to, like you said, it bridges the bridge between humans. It's like, okay, I'm not actually flawed and broken, and something's wrong with me because I'm having thoughts of whatever, suicide or these sorts of things. Like, we need to be sharing these things so people can see that we're human, right? So yes, I love that you said that. Um, and then I wanted to share like a little mini story, because for me, like the question is, how has self-disclosure positively impacted my life? So um, my last long-term relationship, um, we both had a similar attachment style. We both were scared of certain aspects of intimacy. And there was an incident that happened. We got into an argument, and I started to notice my ego starting to come forward and like wanting to gaslight and wanting to like change perception and make him not like see that through this lens, because because it was self-preservation. I was in self-preservation because I didn't want to be seen as scared, or I didn't want to be seen as inadequate. So because I chose to hide this, it led to this giant mountain of conflict. Okay, so we went our separate ways, didn't talk for a couple days, and in this time I like softened. My ego softened. It came back down from hell hill, and it was like, okay, I need to practice. And this is when I also came forward and started doing authentic relating. So I got to reveal this. I have to own my ego, and I have to reveal my ego. So I sat down, I did a lot of writing, and I like wrote out all the things, all the little games, all the little things that my ego does to try and protect me from feeling scared, which is the main one, or inadequate, or shame, or any of these things. And I started to like just really get clear about all the little games that my ego plays. I sat my partner down and I shared all of them. And it was very scary for me, but what it led to was it led to a great amount of intimacy, and it led to my partner being able to support me when these things come up, as opposed to being triggered by them, right? Say, this young part, our egos are usually very young, right? This young part in us is just trying to survive, trying to preserve, or to feel safe, right? So can you talk to my ego? Can you talk to my young inner child part when this is coming up, right? And I think that's the birthplace of a solid relationship, is when you can bring forward your trauma, your ego, all these parts, and let your partner into this world. And I'm telling you, for myself, like, it really mitigated a lot of conflict being able to do that. So that was a big thing for me. So I would say the biggest thing that came out of that was greater intimacy, and greater humility, obviously, on my part, because it was really humbling to bring forward those parts of myself. So yeah.
I've seen that be really beautiful in our community too. Like, yeah, sometimes people are up in the comments and stuff, whether it's like us sharing these conversations on YouTube, or like a post in the community. Yeah, occasionally you're gonna get some like troll in the comments saying some bullshit. But also, like, I've just seen our community be so supportive as well.
Yeah.
When we share, like, I put out a post the other day, and it was somewhat vulnerable to share, and just that outpouring of like love and support, and like, yeah, me too, I get this, I totally feel the same way you do, thanks for sharing this. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would say 95% 5% of the comments that we get on YouTube are pretty positive for the most part.
Yep.
There's the 5%, but hey, that's going to be on everything. And I think YouTube's the worst for trolls. So if you're only hitting 5% on YouTube, you're doing pretty good. So
Yeah.
keep the love coming, folks. And if you want to give feedback, give it with tact and grace, not like to tear people down.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you two?
I love this episode. This is one of my favorite. I say that. I feel like I say that about every episode.
I think you have
every
actually.
episode. Yeah, probably. But it's just so good. I love it. It's
We're
so
gonna do a little
fun.
montage of clips and Reno every episode. This has been my favorite episode.
But you always say it after when it's just the three of us together. So I'm glad you said it live.
Yeah. No,
I was like, that's my
That's
favorite
true.
episode.
Yeah,
It
totally
was
do.
super juicy. And I want to just thank you two for sharing your wisdom and your vulnerability. Like, wow, like, yeah, you really, I feel let in, and I feel also seen. So thank you.
You too. I feel like this episode, what we've been up to here, what we've discussed is like you said, it's the essence of the gay men's brotherhood. It's the essence of gay men going deeper.
Yeah.
And it's like what brought us here, as you shared at the beginning, Matt, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just want to point out that we have connection circles. So come and practice this. So we come into a big group, and then we offer questions or a little mini teaching, and then we break off into groups of 3. And you can do what Reno and Michael and I do, and you can share and practice intimacy and vulnerability with your fellow brothers. So come and join those. And then if that's not up your alley, then you can come the last Thursday of every month to our GMB Zoom Hangout, which is a sharing circle, not a connection circle, where we're still going to get connection, but it's more like one person shares, and everybody's listening, and you're just kind of getting more relatability maybe than connection. So yeah, lots of opportunities for connection and relatability in our community. So take advantage of that. If you're not in the Facebook group already, join us on Facebook at Gay Men's Brotherhood. gaymensbrotherhood.com, courses, all of our resources get on our email list there, because people on our email list get first dibs for all of our opportunities. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We love getting your comments. We love seeing what you're up to and hearing what you're up to. And if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, please leave us a rating, 5 stars preferably, and a review. We need reviews, because reviews are really what push us up in the standings, so it gets into more ears of people that need this. So, and that's what we're all about. We get a lot of emails almost daily now of people being like, wow, your podcast has helped me so much, and it's transformed me. It actually was encouraged me to get into therapy, or all these different things. So if you pushing this forward, leaving a review, different things, sharing the episodes, it's helping not just us, it's helping other people in our community. And our main mission here at the Brotherhood is to elevate the consciousness and the opportunity for meaningful connection in our community. So
one of my straight friends told me he listened to our podcast, and he's like, and he said it helped him too. It was really cool. It's like, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're talking about life stuff, not just gay stuff.
Exactly.
Like, it's related to gay men specifically, but anybody could benefit from the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you all next week. Much love.